Welcome, everybody. We're delighted to be here today on this webinar, AI Technology and the Talent Pool. It's such an important subject in terms of what boards are thinking about, what boards need in terms of experience, composition, how boards approach their work. So really important. And I'm delighted that we've partnered today with Rita and First Board to bring you this webinar, which blends the perspective from Europe and from the US on how boards are developing, the talent that's needed, the availability of that talent, and how boards can find some of the sort of the experience that they need on these issues, particularly around cyber, AI, and transformation. Just a few words up front. We've given ourselves an hour and a little bit over the hour, so we have a good opportunity for a great discussion with the panel, and but also your questions, which is super important. When we come to questions, could I ask you please to use the Q&A function, and we'll take questions. Do start as we go through the webinar, and we'll take questions from the floor. And obviously, the webinar is being recorded, but it won't be publicly available. It will be shared only on demand. And before we perhaps head into the meat and the substance of today's webinar, I'd like to just ask a poll question and take the pulse if I can. So Layla, if we could move to the next chart, please. And this goes right to the nub of the matter. Is there a shortage of technology talent? A, yes, there's a very small talent pool and chronic overdemand for these individuals. B, the talent pool is still limited, but the pipeline is improving, just a question of time. And C, no, there is in fact a strong, deep and diverse talent pool for technology, often coming up via different career paths. So if I could please ask you to vote. I think the voting is available. Sadly, the panelists can't vote, but I suspect I can guess what your answers would be. And then I'm going to ask either Millie or Layla just to let me know when we've everybody's had an opportunity to vote. I'll give them just a moment. I know what I hope the answer will be, but I'm often proved wrong. So could you share that? Oh, that's interesting. So 11%, there's a very small talent pool and chronic over demand. 68% that the talent pool is still limited, but improving. And 21% that there is in fact a strong, deep and diverse talent pool. Well, I think this is going to be very much the heart of our discussion for the panel. So thank you for the answers. And we will be capturing this and sharing this as part of the charts. Next chart, please. Before we could we move? Thank you. Before we move on to our panelists, just a little bit about Fidelio and First Board, as I think we have a number of people cross invitees. So Fidelio's focus is building better boards. It's very much helping chairs to increase board performance. And obviously technology is a critical part of that. We work through reviews, composition and search, and development. And I can see very clearly that the theme of technology is coming up in all three areas of our work very, very prominently. And we've listed some of our partners and accreditations across the bottom, and which perhaps gives you a theme of that working across different stakeholders. And I think across all those partners as well, we would also see technology being very prominent. Next chart, please. And then I just wanted to summarize, and I know Rita's going to do the same, some of the trends that we're seeing, and I hope the panel will pick up on this afterwards, in terms of technology in the UK and Europe in particular. And this is across all our practices. And I think there are 5 key points that I'd like to make. Firstly, that I'd say all boards recognise the need to strengthen that technology capability. But I would also say that there are still some reservations about whether technologists um, are able to contribute to the rounded work of the board. And I hope that we will pick up on this as a theme afterwards. Secondly, we are now seeing boards moving beyond the sort of reliance on one board member who's got a really strong tech background to really thinking through with each new appointment how to increase the capability of the board as a whole. So there's a shift that we've seen across Europe in that regard. The third point is we still see a lot being projected onto a new board member who comes with a technology background, and that can often cover transformation, operations, cyber, innovation. So very sort of broad expectations. And I think we're moving through a phase of understanding what technology means. The fourth point I'd like to make is the most effective technology NEDs are really, really good at understanding how the board works and couch so many of their questions and challenge and guidance in terms of the people and the resource. So far from being remote and distant from the work of the board, actually working through exactly the same levers that you would see the board work through on other key aspects. And the fifth point is, and here perhaps I would differ slightly from, and I'd be interested in Rita's response on this as well, from the poll question, that we do see that there is actually a broad universe of talented senior technology professionals, but they're often following a different career path, and so there is a question about the visibility as well. And again, it's a theme that we can come back to. Just practically, we're seeing that boards are becoming much more structured about how they deal with technology. About 6% of FTSE 100 boards have dedicated board technology committees. And actually, in regulated industries, we're seeing a higher percentage. We're seeing boards really build technology into their annual review process and being thorough about this. We're also seeing the focus on AI from about a year ago, where it was much more of an executive matter, to boards beginning to grapple with where their intervention is needed, how they bring oversight, the governance of AI. And without a doubt, resilience has become a major point of discussion. And I know, from a European perspective and from a UK perspective, we're all looking at major companies that have been hit very hard on cyber attacks. So that's just a sort of an overview of some of the things that we're seeing. And I'm going to hand over to Rita to say a few words about First Board and also what you're seeing in the market. So Rita, welcome.
Thank you so much, Gillian. Excited that we're doing this together here. So I'm the founder of firstboard.io, and firstboard.io is a collective of women technology leaders who are really at the forefront of, AI innovation and all the trends which are happening right now in the US. Several of our members actually are already on the board. Laura is a member of firstboard.io, and she can tell us all about her board experience in a moment. And some of our members have not been appointed to the board. So it's interesting to see the results of the questions earlier, because we believe there's actually a lot of talent, a lot of very senior technology executives, and specifically women, who are ready, to join a board, and who just have not been considered. They're not in the network or other reasons. So we actually believe that it's not a talent issue. It is an issue of that the network isn't broad enough. So our members have expertise in AI. I mentioned that, definitely cybersecurity, SaaS, generative AI, robotics, health tech, so a whole range of really innovative technologies. And some of our members have been part of, big, successes, in the technology world. They have taken a company through an IPO, or they've taken a company, through an acquisition by a larger technology company. So we have, and a lot of our members also have global experience. So they've worked, across, different countries, different regions. So they really are experts at what they're doing. And they've been involved in fundraising, investor relations, growth strategy. So this is the talent pool we're bringing together, and we're amplifying And the goal is to get more of our members in our larger ecosystem on company boards, private and public. And that also includes companies who might be based outside of the US. So there might be a company based in the UK or in Sweden or somewhere else, and they are looking to grow into the US market. They would benefit from having somebody in the US who understands the space, who can help them scale, maybe open up doors. So we're looking at those companies as well, in addition to companies here in the US. Next slide, please. So, what are the trends? So here in the US, we feel or we think that many sitting board members are overboarded. In fact, you know, here's a study from November 2023, and 60% of the S&P 500 companies and 40% of the Russell 3000 companies have actually now an overboarding policy where they're restricting board members to be no more, on no more than 3 seats, which is an increase, from, a few years earlier when only 36% of the S&P 500 and 33% of the Russell 3000 had such a policy. So that indicates that it is recognized that a lot of our sitting board directors today are overboarded, and companies are trying to roam that in a little bit. The other interesting thing, NASDAQ last year did a study, the Pulse study, and in that study, one of the main findings was that only 7% of organizations have boards with AI experience, but 91% of the companies plan to add it. There's a lot of interesting data in that study, and I would encourage everyone to take a look at it. And then of course, AI, cybersecurity, data privacy, industry experience, and strategic development and execution, that was also mentioned as kind of the key elements which would benefit current boards in their composition. And we're making progress. Women are holding more board seats in the US, about a third. This is for public companies. But there are only 1 out of 10 holds a board chair seat. So women in the US are getting on companies more so on public than private, I would say, but they're still not the chair. So a lot of work to be done, and that's our mission. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. And all themes that we will pick up on in the panel where we have a broad representation, including chairs, so we can tackle some of those themes. Could we move to the next chart, please? Before we come to our panel discussion, I'm going to challenge you with another poll question, again, to just get a little bit of feedback from the audience. And from your perspective, what are the reasons for the perceived shortage of technology talent on boards? Is it supply, that there just are too few technology professionals? Is it demand? Or is it that rapid technology is outpacing talent development? And sorry, the B was the overboarding point that we talked, that Rita spoke about. So let's see if we could just take the pulse of the audience. And while I'm just waiting, if you do have questions, please do keep them coming. I've seen that a few are coming in, so please do ask your questions so that we make sure that we can address them when we come to the panel session. So this is much closer. This is quite interesting. 32% think that there is a supply shortage, 26% that it's high demand, and the overboarding point that Rita raised. And this is really one for the panel, 41% that technology development is outpaced, so the rapid technology development is outpacing the talent development. And I really would like to hear what the panel has to say on that particular point. Excellent. Well, I'd like to now move into the panel session, and I'm going to hand over to Diane Kerckhove, who, if we could move to the next chart, please, who is our moderator today. Diane is a board member of First Board and is also, I think, heading or founding the New York chapter. Has an illustrious career in technology, the founder and former chief operating officer of Adelaide Metrics, and a really very extensive experience across, I guess, ad tech and media tech, and ideally suited to just talk us through and lead us through this panel discussion today. I'm going to hand over to Diane to introduce the other panelists and to lead us through the panel. Diane, welcome.
Great, thank you. Thanks to Fidelio and to First Board for putting this webinar together. We've got an exciting one for you today. So welcome to you all. And for today's discussion of AI technology and the board talent pool, we have quite an esteemed set of panelists. Let me quickly introduce them to you. So Laura Clayton McDonnell is the president of corporate business segment at Thomson Reuters, focused on customer and cultural transformation, driving positive results, growing market share, and developing high performance teams. She has extensive sales management and legal experience and has held several executive level positions at leading companies in the high tech industry, including ServiceNow, Microsoft, Aspect Software, IBM. And she's had various senior sales and legal roles at Sun Microsystems, Cisco, and Apple. She's been honored many times for her work, including as the 2022 Top 100 Global Sales Leader, sponsored by the Modern Sale and Collective, and as a recipient of the 2008 YWCA Silicon Valley Tribute to Women Award. She's an avid champion of women and is a member of the advisory council of the Center for Equity, Gender, and Leadership at UC Berkeley, and a member of the Women's Forum of New York. She sits on many boards, including as a board member at Zuora, the leading cloud-based subscription management platform provider, and a board member of the private company Signal AI, the leading external intelligence company. She received a Bachelor of Science degree with distinction from San Jose State and a joint JD MBA degree from the University of California at Berkeley. And she's licensed to practice law both in the DC area and in the state of California. So Anna de Kerckhove is a board chair and NED of public companies and VC-backed companies, namely MoneyHub, Evoke, Eagle Eye, and Blackbird. She's a tech leader and senior expert in digital transformation, MarTech, media, entertainment, and e-commerce. She's an investor in Europe and in Africa, and is also an advisor and mentor to startups and entrepreneurs. Anne's an experienced international executive with over 20 years leading some of the fastest growing and scaling B2B and B2C technology, data, media, e-commerce, and entertainment companies in Europe. And she has extensive non-executive director experience of publicly quoted and private companies. In addition, Anne's an angel investor, mentor, and limited partner in over 20 startups and entrepreneurial funds, including CRE, Daphne, Andala, Flutterwave, and Carlili. And she's actively also promoting women both on boards and within the technology industry. She's a guest lecturer at INSEAD, and she has a Bachelor of Commerce from McGill and an MBA from INSEAD. And Bola Adegbulu is a seasoned entrepreneur, AI investor, and corporate leader with a proven track record of AI innovation across industries. After training as an aerospace engineer at GE's R&D division, Bola transitioned into the AI space in 2014. And as the head of operations at Vuzy, he helped retailers like Harrods leverage AI to gain deeper insights into consumer behavior within physical stores. In 2016, Bola co-founded Predina, an AI-driven company that predicted and prevented road accidents. He partnered with major corporations, including General Motors, the Lind Group, Aoi Nishidiwa, Doa, and Ferrovial MA to leverage AI to transform insurance underwriting and enhance road safety performance. Bola's corporate journey continued in Silicon Valley, where he worked on AI strategy and transformation within Cisco's Chief Strategy Officers Group, and then joined as a senior investor at AI Fund, a venture capital fund led by Andrew Ng, a globally recognized AI leader. At AI Fund, Bola plays a pivotal role as a senior investor, collaborating with CEOs and executives of corporations to drive innovation and transformation. So, with all that said, and to kick us off, we have some questions for our panelists. First, I would say for all of you, and maybe Laura, you can start. Can you please describe your background in technology and just share your pathway to the top table?
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for both Fidelio and First Board IO for sponsoring this. This is going to be a tremendous panel. So it was really intriguing, the questions. So I can't wait for us to involve the audience too. So you heard a little bit about sort of like this laundry list of tech companies that I've been a member of. But I'm going to take it a little bit more deep. I am not traditionally trained, as you heard, as a technologist or an engineer or a computer scientist. I just happen to focus in on those industries. And a little bit of, I happened to grow up in Silicon Valley before it was Silicon Valley. So it was a natural thing for me to have my career be a part of many of those organizations in Silicon Valley. But the path to the top table is kind of interesting. I think about it as the intersection of law, business, and technology, and helping to deliver value to a board from a go-to-market perspective. And the way that I got from my career to being on a board was in two paths. One path was through David Schneider, who was the CRO for ServiceNow. And I told him about my interest in serving on a board, and he suggested a program at Santa Clara University that helped women understand what it took to be on a board. So it's a little bit of a training. And the second thing he recommended was joining First Board IO and having a conversation with Rita. Yes. And it's just a wonderful program. Not only is it the networking piece of it, but this is really sharply, directly focused on helping you get to that top table, skilling you to make that happen. And I can't wait till we get to one of the questions here about, how do you attract that talent? But it's really about taking all of that I learned in technology about how it's a facilitator to helping companies achieve their goals, whether it's to digitally transform, save money, make money, become operationally efficient, and improve customer loyalty. And those are some of the things that we're focused on in Thomson Reuters. But throughout my career, that really was the focus. How do we help customers achieve those goals? The vehicle, technology to make that happen, which will evolve and change and transform throughout the years. So I'm really excited once again to it's an honor to be on this program and be a part of the conversation that we're about to have.
Great, thanks, Laura. Bola, do you want to take that and just tell us a little bit more about your background and your path?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the Fidelio team and First Board for bringing me on this panel. I'm always interested to learn from the audience as well as regards to the questions. So I would say I have a little bit more of a different path in terms of my journey. I started my journey as an engineer as General Electric, and I found my way into I would say where I am now through entrepreneurship. So it was a very, very different path, not really a corporate path. I left General Electric and I joined an early stage startup in the UK using AI. And then after that, I co-founded two companies. And through that experience, I raised venture capital. Through that experience, I was able to really work with a lot of large corporates, as you mentioned. And then I found my way into the world of Silicon Valley. And after angel investing myself, angel investing in companies, I felt wanted to do it as a full-time career. So I actually sit on boards from a private perspective, where we're actually looking at disrupting, if I can use that word, looking at startups that are attacking different large markets. And so I'm on that side in terms of working with those companies. And often those companies, as you can see, given the AI wave, often grow so fast and become the leaders of tomorrow, and really defining the future of the age that we're in. I think from a technology perspective, it has now gone from something that is something as an afterthought to something that's actually defining the era. So that's kind of been my path. And then that's opened doors where I now advise a number of corporates in terms of helping them redefine their AI strategy, helping them in some cases build solutions. But that's much more on an advisory perspective. So I've actually taken a much more different route to the panelists.
Yeah, you're right. You're right in the middle of it all. Great. Anne, do you want to take that last?
Sure, Diane. I think obviously part of this panel is showing how variety is actually a good thing, and how the definition of an innovator or a technologist can be so diverse. It doesn't mean you're a coder, and I think that's really important for people who are recruiting on the board to understand that. By the way, I did learn how to code. I'm a terrible coder. You really don't want me to code anything in your business, and thank God with AI, I don't need to anymore. Bola can do it for me using lovely prompts and be much more efficient. But that's really important. We used to think that bringing somebody on a board with a technology background meant you were looking for a CTO. And in fact, people who have had diverse careers will actually have that broad perspective of leveraging technology, but not necessarily being a CTO. And I think that's very important. I started my career in finance. And it was actually a boss of mine who realized I didn't actually care about finance. I cared about what I financed. I thought everybody only cared about what they financed, not the actual tool of finance. It turns out I was the exception. And very wisely, he put me on a new division that was being created about project finance, where you finance things that have never been done before. And it was an automatic passion. I just discovered that's what I loved doing. I loved asking all the difficult questions. I loved trying to figure out what the future was. And so I discovered I was meant for innovation and technology. And then I went to do an MBA, and then went to BCG. And at BCG, it seemed they always wanted to put me on projects where companies were stuck and had to figure out a new path to their future. And I loved those. Some people hated those assignments. I loved them. I loved it even more when it was a traditional company that needed to really pivot to something and had to leverage technology. And that became kind of an editorial line in my career. And then it was that boom of the first phase of startups. And so, of course, I joined my first startup, and then I just went from startup to scale up, to IPOing, to building my own portfolio of investments. And then when I was 40, I got my opportunity to go on my first board, unsurprisingly, because they needed their first woman on a board. And there weren't that many at the time that were known. And specifically, it was about music and technology, and I had done both. That probably meant that would allowed me to get on a board without any board experience, particularly since it was a PLC, so it was a public company. And I often tell people, for your first board, look at that really big hook where you are exactly the experience that they need, and then they'll be willing to take that opportunity to bring somebody that doesn't have board experience and then train you to become a good board member, because it is training. And then I was an exec, as I said, for several years, and then I suddenly wanted to go plural and to actually experience technology through the lens of fintech, media, loyalty, and have been a plural board member ever since.
Great. Love that advice about the hook, because I think that is sort of key. So let's say let's go back to Laura. Let's ask why you think boards struggle to attract and find the technology talent that they actually need.
I think there's a complex answer to this. There was wonderful sort of statistics that we heard, and also the perspective of the audience too. And I think there's a couple of different factors. One, it's really important for there to be a holistic approach. So I want to make sure that you take that away. So how do boards look to attract and retain talent? It's not only identifying, recruiting new directors with tech expertise, but also supporting the current directors in acquiring digital knowledge and making, we all, as members of a board, we went through an orientation process. It could have been informal or formal, but make digital part of the orientation, technology part of the onboarding process. So I think number one, and there might have been a question to this effect in the survey, is that it's rapidly evolving what's happening in technology. And as that landscape changes, the gap between what you know and what's really happening out there continues to sort of widen. And there are emerging technologies that it is challenging to stay on top of, even folks who are in the tech industry, whether it's AI or blockchain before or cybersecurity, and who knows what next is going to happen. So the traditional systems that we have to encourage or educate folks to stay on top of things, it just may be a little too slow. How can you keep pace with that? So that's one of the areas. I think the second area is that when you have it rapidly moving along, traditional ways that we come together as a board quarterly, maybe an annual risk assessment, it may actually be too slow in terms of how boards are structured and their cadence and the way that they operate. I think the other piece of it is around how do you get the expertise? And so boards do recognize that, but they may not have the relationships with tech leaders out there in the industry. That's one piece. The other piece is how does it get integrated into the overall strategy so it can't, having the technology expertise or experience with the board cannot be that distinct from what's happening in the business itself. So it's got to be integrated in the overall strategy. And so there may end up being then this mismatch, a limited understanding that the board has with respect to technology and what's really happening in the company. So it can make it difficult to engage. There's challenges. Well, what is the role of a tech expert? And I think we sort of arrived at a conclusion, and it is that it can't be just somebody who is a CTO, but somebody who is sort of aligned or adjacent in the industry. You could be in the industry, but have a functional, sort of wear a functional hat that's not directly related to technology. So broadening your understanding of what that is, ensuring that we recognize that with the rapid change, we need to educate and support board members differently. And then third, we need to make sure that it's connected to the strategy of the company so it doesn't operate on its own island. So I think, once again, there's an approach that companies would need to take in order to address some of these challenges that are out there in terms of attracting the talent.
Great. Yeah, I mean, maybe Anne also has got a comment on this as well. I see you nodding a lot. I'm just curious if there's anything that you'd like to add on why boards struggle to attract or find the talent that they need.
I think it's even in how they create the job description. If it's like, I want you to have been on 5 boards, I want you to do this, I want you to have been a CTO, you're de facto excluding a whole series of very talented people who are actually doing tech today. And it's so important to be working with board members who work in tech today, not who did it 20 years ago, because their relevance, their frameworks, even how you build an architecture, how you build things will have changed completely. We've gone from monolithic to microservices. That's just one example. An exec that worked in tech 20 years ago built monolithic platforms. So the ability to look into a younger talent pool into the executive world, that's what actually allows you to really think about talent differently. And again, not working with people who think, oh, you said a tech company, a tech committee, that's a CTO. So really getting to the depth of what you're trying to look for in that talent. And that will make you look at a very much broader group and much more diverse group of talent.
Yeah, I think that's key, and kind of leads into my next question, which actually is for you. About, do we have a good understanding of the holistic role that boards play in overseeing technology, so both the opportunity and the risk?
I mean, Laura touched upon it. No, we tend to think about it as I will appoint a technology board member. In fact, having been the first tech person on a board, I think 5 times, you're the single voice and nobody can relate to you. So you end up talking to yourself or just kind of talking to the rest of the board. So you need to have at least 2 people who understand technology, maybe from a very different background, but that allows you to change the board. The word holistic is very important. It's not just about who you point, it's how you train your other board members. It's how you make audit think about things that have everything to do with technology. I mean, with the cyber risk, if you don't have audit future-proofing the business from a cybersecurity point of view, then you don't actually have an audit committee. But before, audit used to be very much the CFO realm and legal. But that's no longer what audit is about. And the unfortunate incident that we saw with M&S is something every company is facing. Everybody is subject to a DDoS attack. everybody is subject to somebody penetrating your data systems, and therefore you have to be super excited about technology and equally be almost prepared for a technology war inside, and that can be very uncomfortable for certain board members, right? To be going through saying, let's just assume this year we're going to have a DDoS attack. Let's look at every infiltration point. Let's know that we might not see that attack for 6 months because it will stay dormant, because that's how the best attacks happen like that. They will be very quiet, they will be very patient, and they will infiltrate through the smallest little part of your organization. And therefore accept that you will try to analyze every risk possible. And yet the person or the organization that's going to attack you will always think of a new angle. So you have to be incredibly comfortable with risk. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you're in technology or not. If you're a bank, you're subject to that. If you're a grocer, you're subject to that. So, yeah, the ability, also as board members, we have a responsibility. Take AI. I take an hour every weekend to play with a new AI tool, and I go from Claude to ChatGPT to V0, and I just build things myself, sometimes for absolutely no purpose except to understand. And I think as board members, we can become a little bit complacent on our own curiosity and learning, particularly when it's in tech, because it uses a bunch of acronyms, and therefore, unless you're comfortable with those acronyms, feels very uncomfortable in terms of stepping, but that is a must. And again, also, the board, it's not just, board members aren't just about board members, it's about every expert you bring in. And I think Gillian mentioned it, that's why we're seeing so many tech committees being formed, because it allows you to not only have board members, but to bring in specialists. Because if you're a cybersecurity expert, you're not an AI expert, or I mean, it's very rare. Congrats if you can be, but you're potentially not a data expert. Well, on the AI case, you would be. So the tech committees allow you to go really deep, because I think a lot more and more of board work actually happens outside of the boardroom. And it allows you to surround yourself with super experts in a very specific niche and to bring them alive. And then the last trick I would say is, if you're a chair or even if you're a board member, a lot of your portfolio and a portfolio board member, you'll see a lot of your companies are facing the same issues, but from a different angle, from a different industry. I often put them together so that they create a peer network where they can approach topics together. So my portfolio actually help each other out just very naturally. And I think those are all things we need to consider when we want to transform how boards get ready for tech.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I was going to say we took about 30 minutes before we got to AI, but as the hot topic, fortunately, we have an expert in Bola. So Bola is AI game changer in terms of mindset, as well as the board skills matrix? I mean, how do you view that?
Yeah, I view it as absolutely a game changer in terms of the future of business. I think whether you're a business that is directly impacted by AI, so let's say financial services, education, or services as a whole, you are sort of at the forefront of that, or your business that you might not think you're directly impacted by AI, but in actual fact you are, because there are companies out there that are leveraging AI to optimize their workforce, and as such more proficient than you. So I think it's a fundamental shift in the world that I think it requires a very different mindset. I think a couple of things. I think the first thing is really thinking about. I think for sure we need to worry about the risks of AI, but I think moving back to coming from Silicon Valley and moving back to Europe, I think one of the things that I noticed in Europe is a little bit more risk adverse. And I think there's that in itself is a risk. So there's also a risk of missing out. And if some of your maybe US competitors have started leveraging AI, that advantage starts to compound in terms of talent, in terms of culture, and so on. So I think there is a risk of not doing anything. You have to do something. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Unfortunately, AI is evolving so fast. So I think boards need to factor in that there will be some risk as part of that approach. I think a lot of the leading companies, period, are kind of leaning into that. Even companies like JP Morgan that are highly regulated are really leaning into that, despite the fact that they're a regulated entity. So I think boards need to, I think first need to have a different mindset, a much more experimental mindset, a much more open mindset in terms of, what can AI do for me? I think that's super important, and I think it also requires, even from a technology perspective, it also requires a different mindset in terms of this is not just another piece of technology. It is something that is very, very transformational across all parts of the kind of stack. So I think it's important to find folks that have as recent as possible AI experience. And I think not trying to toot my own horn, I think there are other VCs, but I think venture capitalists are actually very, very well suited to fill in some of these gaps, because as a venture capitalist, you are looking at the business opportunity and business use cases of these AI technologies, and you have a very kind of a business mindset. So I think they're well suited to kind of bridging in that business relevance and AI relevance at the same time being plugged in real time to what's happening in this space, and being able to understand and have that pulse on what's happening in this space. So in summary, it absolutely requires a different mindset. I think the board, as mentioned, the board needs to have some basic education in general on AI. Need to lean in and take, have some small experiments, really lean in and really understand what is possible. For sure, it's important to worry about the risks, but I think there's probably way too much on that, and I think there's not enough on the kind of leaning forward. And I think the boards need to also rethink the profile of people that they bring on the boards. I think most of the AI leaders would tend to be earlier in their careers, just given how advanced and how fast moving it is. So I think boards need to have kind of lean into more of that profile. And I think finally, I think AI is a technology that does have an impact on the employees. So it goes all the way down to the employees, and there's real fears, real concerns from employees in terms of job displacement and so on. So I think companies need to really think about how do they incentivize and encourage employees to be a part of that transformation. So it's a really fundamental shift in terms of mindset for sure.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Diane, can I just butt in? We're having loads of questions, great questions. And I wonder if I could perhaps just share 3 questions or groups of questions with you, and ask you to share those with the panel, just so that we reflect some of the audience feedback. The first is actually on that, what Bola just touched on. And the question is, as AI is evolving so quickly, how does technology talent on boards consider the human impact to an organization? Not the loss of jobs to it, not just the loss of jobs to AI, thinking about the impact on innovation, inspiration, critical thinking, ethical decisions, societal impacts. Do you see this as part of the board role? So that's one, and there's a cluster of questions around that.
I just go with that, and then
do you want to go with that, and I'll come back with other ones? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Bola, if you want to just follow, and then Lauren, and if you've got additional comments, we welcome them as well. But
yeah, I think it's obviously highly dependent on the board and the company's purpose, as quite frankly. And I think each company needs to align in terms of kind of what's important to their purpose. I think for sure, I think without a doubt, AI will lead to elimination of jobs. It is a core part of the functionality. However, I think it doesn't just need to be that. If, as a matter of fact, the best use case, some of the best fast growing use cases are use cases that increase demand. So increase sales growth, increase demand, expand market share, versus those that kind of optimize operations. So it's not just kind of a solution that will minimize jobs. It can also increase the market share and increase growth for businesses as well. But these are very sensitive topics. And each company needs to have their own framework in terms of what would we use AI to do, and what we use it to do. It's highly dependent on the company and its values.
So I'd like to offer up a sort of an example with Thomson Reuters, and also a board that I'm a member of called Signal AI. It's headquartered in London. And you can tell by the name of it, it must use artificial intelligence to do what it does. And basically, it takes in all the social media feeds and it provides back to customers insights regarding potential risks out there so they can see around the corners and adjust their business operations differently. I think we've been talking about how the role of a board has evolved significantly from oversight of management to being much more strategic and involved in guiding an organization's direction, policies, procedures, and activities, monitoring performance, managing risks. So it's definitely this higher role. So AI can play a role in that too, in providing up to the board information that is organized in a way that is analyzed, draw out the insights so the board can make decisions. And so one of the ways that you do that through the products that are available, we personally have a product that can do just that. It analyzes the risks that are out there, provides that up to you in a way where it essentially takes the manual work out of looking at all the data that's available. And so when I think about the benefit of AI, it's really about automating those routine tasks that are mundane to free up time for you to do the bunch of strategic advisory ones that require human business judgment. And that's the benefit to it. So when we think about what we offer to customers, giving them that ability to do that with our products, but also inside of Thomson Reuters, we also use those products to free up time. And so whether it's Copilot, being a part of your meeting, summarizing the action items, offering up a document that you can then send out, you would have been taking up time administratively to do it. And so when we think about the impact on your job, it's those folks who do not understand nor use AI. Those are the jobs that may be at risk. It's your job versus somebody who knows how to do it, builds it in as part of what they do. And so that's a real important distinction. And then one last point that I would make is that any organization, whether it's the board sort of advising management team to do this, ought to have a committee, a set of ethical guidelines, do's and don'ts associated with the use of AI. So those are some of the things that we offer up.
Great, thank you. Jillian, do you want to go to the next question?
Yeah, I've got, they're all about competence and technology competence. So if I could perhaps share the three of these and you can see how best to address them. One question is what is the optimal balance of experience of use of technology, of knowledge, of bleeding edge sort of technology developments, getting that balance between sort of, I guess, a technology background and then that real kind of cutting edge experience, and how does that sit? Another question, which I think is quite an interesting one on the plural versus still in executive role. How do you keep current, in particular, if you've gone plural? And I know Anne talked about a little bit, but that's a theme that's coming up again and again. So we may want to expand on that. And then there was quite an interesting question. Are boards too reliant on one technology person? Are boards prone to kind of saying, this is the technology expert, they can deal with it? So three questions about competency, and I'll ask Diane to sort of lead us through addressing those.
Sure. Well, let's go to Anne. It's been a while, and because I think you probably have a breadth of experience in terms of this balance of tech and real experience. And I don't know about dealing with the too reliant on one. I mean, maybe people sort of feel that is or isn't, but anyway, I'll turn it to Anne.
I'll take the first one. The relevance on one, yes. There has been traditionally, because it was the one tech person, we have to move away from that. It doesn't necessarily mean appointing 3 more board members, because again, your board is not just your board members, it's how you build that relevance. Back to the other question, one of the key things that the boards must do is proactively find the talent in the organization that are experts in those subjects and bring them to the board. I was in a board meeting and a strategy session with one of my portfolio companies, and this fantastic data scientist that helps on our AI proposition came to the board and was explaining kind of the product roadmap of that, and it was essential. And he was very patient with some of the board members in terms of helping us ask all the questions to actually understand the product roadmap and why it was so exponentially transformational, as Bola said, because it is that AI is transformational, and board members have to understand that. And so there's a whole proactiveness that chairs and board members need to bring to the table now. It can't just be, and I think Laura mentioned this, you show up at your quarterly board meeting and you have your compliance, ESG, performance metrics, your trading update. No, in between the boards, you need to be going, what are we missing in terms of skill? How do I get it? Who has it in the organization? How do I change the agenda? How do we deep dive into topics? And so I can see now that, and it's not just the chair, it's all your heads of committees have to become 10 times more proactive.
Yeah, that's a great one. Laura, Bola, anything?
Yeah, I was just going to add that it really is. Sometimes I think the board is a little bit of a reflection of the company, in that the company itself needs to have a culture of learning and innovation. And if it's got that it builds into sort of connections with the tech community. It has a strong way to attract top talent. It identifies skills that are really important. The brand is that they'll attend these conferences or partner with an educational institution. All of this has this culture here where it's not just a sort of a one-time thing that you do in terms of bringing on somebody who has technology as their experience. It really is a cultural change that needs to occur. It's ongoing. It's all about sourcing the talent, identifying the talent, investing in their development, and creating those opportunities to build those relationships with the tech community. And when you have that as the culture, the board itself will be a reflection of that, and that it also will build in opportunities for existing board members to learn as they go along here, because it's not something that, I guess it would not be a best practice for folks to rely on just one, but really say, I'm going to invest in this. I'm going to embrace technology, whatever the version of it that it is, as a tool for growth. And that means, we're going to make it a priority for the board also.
Diane, here's one question, and it's actually, so what are the main barriers to firstboard.io members getting board roles if there's strong demand and existing qualified directors are overboarded? This, I think, is sort of a general question, not just for firstboard.io members, but, in general, why is it that, not more younger people or people who have not been appointed to a board, what are the barriers? And I would love, Diane, take this over.
I'm sure everybody's got a point of view on that, but Bola, I don't know if you have a point of view on this. We can start with you.
I think it's not being aware of the opportunities. I think there are a lot of talented folks, a lot of talented leaders, and I think they're not aware of the opportunities. They're not plugged into the community. As a matter of fact, I think I've been on several private equity venture capital boards, and I only became aware of kind of public boards via one of my mentors who actually introduced me to Gillian. So I think it's really around just the awareness of opportunity. I don't think there's enough outreach to that community, and folks that I think are founders that are running companies that are worth $300 billion, at a really skilled level. There's just enough. The talent is there, but they're not reaching out. They're not actively reaching out to that cohort. They're not even aware of the opportunities and how it works and how to interface with that. I think it's more of a network thing.
And you were raising your hand. What do you thought? Yeah.
Yeah, I do a lot of mentoring to very experienced exec who are looking for their first role. There is a whole coaching or mentoring to be done about how you write your CV to be board attractive. It's a very different perspective from being an executive. And even the interview style is different. Because I had nomination, I interview a lot of people to put on boards. And if they're having an interview with me on an exec style way, it's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for them to, in the first conversation, challenge me about the company strategy, to have a point of view, to challenge me on AI, to challenge me on how am I future-proofing that business? Have we thought about the following things? And you do that in exec, but you tend to focus on your career a lot, right? You go through, I did this, I was at this, I achieved this. As a board member, I'm looking for somebody who's going to help that diversity of conversations and really open new perspective. So the way you interview is also very different. So what I recommend to anybody is be part of the networks like yours, Diane and Rita, but also get coached, get trained, pitch yourself to people like me who interview board members every single day, and receive the feedback and adapt your style to be board ready.
Great. That's great advice. Actually, the board interview comment I think is particularly relevant for folks.
It really is. You know, when I attended the Santa Clara University's board program, the graduation was preparing your materials and being interviewed by a 3-panel group of individuals who are venture capitalists, people who are from non-gov committees, etc. So you could practice exactly what Anne talked about. The barriers are really clear. There's unconscious bias. There is traditional skill sets and networks that folks tap into. The influence of the CEO is really critical. When you look at the individuals that are currently in place, you don't get a lot of so folks that look a little bit differently. And so we have to have organizations that are willing to break through, challenge, and advocate on our behalf. So it's a little bit of a commercial that I'm giving for First Board, because that's exactly it. Because Rita was able to connect up with a traditional person in the C-suite and say, I'm going to help you by opening your eyes to the potential that's out there. And he took that to heart and drove that. So I wasn't the only one. There were other women, because once you're opening that up, the rest can follow.
And I think Bola was making sort of that point as well. And it's a very powerful point that's coming across. I'd like to just add on one point that we found. Anne joined us on the Seat at the Table program and was which was a similar sort of concept of board readiness. One of the things was also presence. It's the technical skills, but it's also the confidence and the presence to occupy the space, and so it's a rounded approach. Bola's back. I'm glad I thought we'd lost Bola. Can I ask another question from the floor, more about the chair? And this is really interesting. How should we think about the chair role? Because the theme that I think all of you have brought up is a lot of the talent's going to be a lot younger, come of different routes. The chair is maybe the last person to have that exposure. But I know we have at least one chair on the panel, but just perhaps Diane taking us through that sort of how should we be thinking about the chair role in a technology context?
Yeah, I think I'll toss that one to Anne, but I do want to note that I know we're coming up on the hour. We have slotted this for an hour and 15 minutes, so we're going to carry on. But if you have to drop off, feel free. I have another question, but I think taking the audience or panelist or whatever attendee questions is important at this point. So we'll carry on with those for right now. But Anne, do you want to take that question about the chair role?
Absolutely. So again, I mentioned this, the chair has to have a lot of proactiveness and resilience, and constantly rethinking, not just accepting that the board agenda from last year is going to fit with the board agenda of this year. The other thing that's a really interesting role is your senior independent director. So if you're a chair that doesn't have a tech background, I highly recommend you take your SID, senior independent director, who has a technology background. Just like if you're the technology chair, you want potentially your SID to be a CFO audit expert, because you need that sounding board but we all have blind spots. It's just natural. And as a chair, because you're chairing, the possibility for a blind spot is even bigger, because you're managing the room, you're making sure everybody has a voice. You might be missing out completely on an angle. And so I do a lot of work with my chair before and after the board to say, you know what? We missed this topic, or we didn't put enough attention to this, or this was too late in the conversation, and then we work together. Equally, that it's the same thing between your CEO and your chair. You guys have to partner together and challenge each other. And the best practice really is have a conversation before the board, have a post-board debrief. And that post-board debrief is really about challenging one another, about saying, how could that have been a better meeting? What are the topics we didn't cover? You need a huge amount of trust for that, right? You'd want to be able to go to every post-board meeting saying, we were fabulous, weren't you? Wasn't that a great meeting? But that's actually of no use whatsoever. So you have to lean into the trust and the relationship to say every one of these meetings will be kind of a mirror to each other and a challenge. And that's the only thing that is useful actually in a post-board debrief. And I find those and that establishment of that trusting relationship and challenging relationship means that you then are completely open to change, constant change. And I think Bola mentioned it. Like, I mean, the AI transformation means from one quarterly board to another, the topics have moved ahead so fast.
What do you find as a chair? I mean, I think we've talked about this space of the quarterly meetings. I mean, how often do you or should one be communicating with other committee heads or what have you between meetings, or how does that go for you usually?
At least every 2 weeks, if not more often, depending on the topics. And that's another thing. Before, the chair basically used to speak to the CEO and the CFO, right? Because those were your official board members, at least in a public company. Your chair role now has changed to speaking to all the execs and then those super experts in the business. It could be the Bola of the company that knows everything about AI, but it could be somebody who knows everything about DDoS attacks. And so I think the chair role is changing from a very narrow audience with the execs to a much broader workforce engagement.
Excellent. Any other questions from the field?
There are, but why don't we move to your question, because we are coming to sort of the top of the, not just the top of the hour, but the end of the 1:45. And what I should say, we're getting great comments in the both in the chat and in through the Q&A. We'll capture these because there's quite a lot of follow-up, brilliant points on InsurTech, for example, and we will make those connections afterwards. But if I could hand back to you, Diane, to perhaps walk us through the remainder of the panel, and then we'll close.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's one last question, and really each of you, I'd love to address as some of this has come up in the discussion, but I think the question really is, what can companies and potential candidates actually do to develop the pipeline for technology talent in the boardroom? So we've talked about associations, we've talked about connecting with VCs, but are there other things, and maybe for those who are looking for board seats on those who are viewing, what can they do to get more present and more aware, as Bola was talking about?
Yeah, so I'll jump in, starting off by the culture comment. It really is the company. I'll do both parts, right? Company and the potential candidates. So for the company, building that culture of innovation and learning, fostering technology as part of how you do your work, encouraging individuals to go to industry events and conferences. So just building that whole sort of brand around it too. I think it's true that, there isn't a company in the world that doesn't leverage technology of some sort. And so it really sort of behooves the company to really dive in here and create that culture of innovation and learning and embracing that as a tool for growth. For candidates, it's really being on that continuous learning curve, seeking out those programs in terms of board readiness. I will tell you they're rigorous. They do take time. The one that I joined was like a 6-week program. And it really did put you through your paces. But as a result, you had a better understanding of it. And for me, it was great because as a corporate securities lawyer, I have one perspective of what happens on the board from a legal perspective, but it was great to have it from the business side of the house too. So what do you do as a candidate? You got to continue to stay current. You got to continue to learn. You need to engage with technology leaders. You need to read widely regarding it. There's lots of great material, publications that come either from consulting organizations like a Deloitte or other kinds of, business schools, law schools that focus in on corporate governance and understanding that. And then I think secondly, as you're doing your learning, you really need to understand how it does implicate the business itself. And connecting technology to business is going to be one of those questions that you need to ask yourself. How would it then facilitate the business? Just as I think Anne mentioned, you're not sort of going through your CV, you really have given it thought, and you can bring thought leadership to how technology can once again drive growth. And you're building once again on this side too, those relationships with tech leaders, going to the conferences, networking, volunteering on even on a nonprofit board could give you that exposure too, because there isn't an entity that is going to be, excused from leveraging technology. And just one thing, I know this focuses on technology, but don't forget about the non-tech part of what you need to understand about running a business and helping to provide that strategic guidance to the management team about it.
That's a great point. Bola, do you want to weigh in as well?
Yeah, I think I think it's a lot of the points that we've already covered. I think often the attractiveness in general to the I'll say the key influential leaders in the next kind of evolution of technology from a public perspective. I don't think it's not necessarily as attractive or as obvious or as clear to some of these leaders. So I think there needs to be maybe a more intentional outreach to some of these folks. There is there is a view, certainly from a startup perspective, or some of these companies, there's a view that it's that incumbent companies, they move too slow, so I think, and that perspective is not necessarily right. So I think there needs to be much more of a direct kind of intentional outreach to some of these folks, because I won't say most of them are not necessarily even looking, or they're not even aware of these opportunities. So I think there needs to be much more intentional outreach to to those core of leaders, because they really do have the perspectives and the insights and the playbooks that I think will really help the companies when they do sit on boards. I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, very, very good point. All right, and we'll give you the last word on this, and then I know we've got a couple more slides just to tee up very quickly, but I think we can do that all in the next 7 minutes. So,
yeah, I would say first don't think about the big public company boards or the big brands. You're not going to be a first board member necessarily there. It steps to that path, right? And therefore find the smaller business, potentially VC backed, where you have exactly the expertise they would need. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't have the big kind of ticket item in terms of salary. Maybe it's only equity, but you will learn from that experience, and then you can get to a bigger board and a bigger board. So really hone in on the board where you will be, just like somebody was saying, if you're the perfect person to bring these people to China because you've worked in China for 15 years, brilliant. Not many people have that experience. So you want to find the board that needs that China exposure or that US exposure or the French exposure in my case, because France is a very complicated market if you've never entered it, and you need a French speaker and this and this and this. And if you know go to market, and if you know, so find the thing where you're just literally like the perfect fit for the problem they're facing. And then you will kind of gain your credibility in terms of a more generalist board member and how much of just a good board member you are. But you have to kind of start with selling something very specific, just like you would when you sell software.
And how about on the corporate side, sort of how do they build their pipeline in terms of they're looking at?
On the big corporates?
Yeah, I'm just saying, you talked a little bit about the board job seeker, but in terms of boards building
on the board side, again, we touched upon it, but it's change your job specs, rethink who you're looking for, be much more open to different people, change recruiters from time to time, go for new platforms, think about networks, think about different ways of recruiting, because let's face it, if you're going to the same recruiters that you've used who are very traditional, their lists need updating as well.
Okay, excellent. Great. Well, I'll turn it back over to Jillian in terms of putting up the next slides, and we can wrap it up. But thank you very much, all of you, for wonderful, wonderful insights.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane, for moderating as well. Thank you. That was excellent. Layla, if we could pop up the
Thank
last
you,
couple of
everyone.
charts. And thank you to the panelists. That was absolutely super. Just to wrap up, I should say brilliant and insightful comments from both the chat and the Q&A, one of which interestingly added sort of advisory boards and advisory panels and advisors, which is perhaps another discussion at another time, but I think another one of those concentric rings of getting that sort of expertise. I mean, really just to wrap up from our side, everybody's confirmed that demand for technology talent. It'll often come through different routes, and that's sort of Bola's point. And I think that he, really described that gap, that gulf, and how do we bridge that, as did Laura. I think Anne also really illustrated the different types of pressures, that the breadth of challenges that boards are facing, and the need for different ways of thinking. That mindset shift has come across very clearly, I think, in the panel discussion. And really just from both our sides, from Fidelio and First Board, very committed to, helping that talent move into the board, thinking about talent differently, making those channels much more efficient and effective, closing those gaps, and building the networks, but also helping people to think differently about finding the talent that they need. And I hope this will be the first of many. I need to talk to Rita about that, but I mean, it's been a pleasure working on this, and we will certainly come back to you both with the charts, but with some follow-up from this. If I just flick through to the next chart, you'll see that both Fidelio and First Board have a number of events coming up, and if people are interested, we'll circulate this. Please do get in touch, and but we'll also debrief on the breadth that we've covered today, and think about how we can drive forward on some of those topics, because the talent is technology is key, but talent is absolutely key, and it's wedding those two. It's so important. So on that note, I'd like to thank our panel, Diane for moderating the panel, Rita for really helping us to make this possible. It's been an absolute pleasure. And our guests, attendees, participants, excellent questions, wonderful contribution in the chat. This is the beginning, not the end. So thank you all very much, also for staying with us for an hour and a quarter, which is quite rare, I think, in today's world. So many thanks to all of you, and we look forward to staying in touch. Many thanks indeed.
Thank you very much, everyone. Let's do it again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.